distraction isn't simply an annoyance. It's a direct manipulation of your brain's reward system. At the core of this is dopamine, a molecule most people misunderstand. It's not about pleasure. It's not the chemical of feeling good. It's the chemical of motivation, of pursuit, of anticipation. And this distinction is critical. The brain releases dopamine not when you get the reward. That surge of excitement you feel when you hear a notification, that's dopamine at work. Your brain gearing up to chase something potentially valuable, even if it's meaningless. This seeking system is ancient. It evolved to help us find food, mates, and safety in unpredictable environments. In the modern world, the same system gets hijacked by digital stimuli, alerts, messages, pop-ups, even the idea of checking your phone. Each of these cues holds the possibility of something novel. And novelty is a powerful dopamine trigger. The brain is biased toward it because, in evolutionary terms, novelty once meant survival. But now it means being yanked out of focus again and again, hundreds of times a day. Each time you shift your attention in response to a distraction, you're not just losing seconds. You're engaging a full neurochemical switch. You release dopamine in a micro surge, and then as the novelty fades, dopamine drops. That drop creates a craving. Your system doesn't just reset, it wants another hit. This sets up a loop: click, scroll, swipe, refresh. Every action becomes part of a reward cycle that isn't fulfilling but keeps you chasing. It feels urgent, but it's hollow. Now here's the key insight: dopamine isn't infinite. It's a finite resource, and if you deplete it with low-value stimuli, you blunt its power for high-value tasks. Think of it like overusing the accelerator on a car. Eventually, you wear out the engine. The more you burn dopamine on distractions, the harder it becomes to summon it when you actually need to focus. Over time, your brain begins to associate effort and attention with fatigue rather than reward, because you've trained it that way. But this is also reversible. If you begin to protect your dopamine system by reducing low-value novelty, by anchoring your attention, by working in focused blocks without interruption, you begin to rewire the circuits. You start to build a brain that finds satisfaction in depth, not surface. A brain that responds to challenge with motivation, not avoidance. And most importantly, a brain that can stay on track long enough to do something meaningful. This is why eliminating distractions instantly isn't just about silencing your phone or shutting a door. It's about interrupting a reward loop that your brain has been tricked into running. Once you understand how that loop works, you can break it. And when you do, your capacity for focus, clarity, and deep work doesn't just return, it compounds. Focus begins with vision, literally. Your visual field, the way your eyes take in information, is directly linked to the neural circuits that govern attention and cognitive control. When your eyes scan broadly, taking in the full periphery, you engage what's called a panoramic view. This is useful for situational awareness, for safety, for detecting motion and potential threats. It's what your brain defaults to when it's in a relaxed or even distracted state. But if your goal is to eliminate distraction and enter deep focus, you need to move out of this panoramic mode and into something very different: a narrow, convergent gaze. Narrowing your visual field, deliberately focusing your eyes on a single point, sends a powerful signal to your brain. It activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, decision-making, and sustained attention. At the same time, it suppresses activity in brain networks that drive mind-wandering and external vigilance, like the default mode network and certain regions of the parietal cortex. This is not a subtle shift. It's a hard biological switch from scanning to focusing, from possibility to precision. What's happening here is that your visual system is tightly integrated with your attentional system. The direction of your gaze literally shapes the direction of your thoughts. This is why people naturally look up or away when they're brainstorming, and why they fixate visually when they're locked into a task. Your eyes don't just observe the world. They tell your brain what to prioritize. So if you're trying to eliminate distractions instantly, start by controlling your gaze. Pick a visual anchor. Your screen, your notebook, a fixed point on your desk, and lock your eyes there. Hold that visual tunnel for at least 30 to 60 seconds. You'll notice something change. Your breathing slows, your awareness of background noise fades, and your thoughts begin to organize. This is the entrance ramp to deep work. You're using your physiology to control your psychology. Now, why is this so effective? Because distraction often begins in the visual domain. Moving objects, flickering lights, open tabs, phone screens, all these compete for your attention through the eyes. If you allow your gaze to wander, you open the door to cognitive drift. But if you restrict your visual field, you starve the distraction system of its primary input. You essentially close the gates at the level of the retina so the brain can reallocate its resources internally. This is also why environmental design is so critical. A cluttered desk creates a cluttered mind because every object in your visual field pulls a thread of attention. Minimize visual noise, and you instantly increase the brain's available bandwidth. It's not about aesthetics, it's about neurobiology. In short, if you want to sharpen your focus, start with your eyes. Tunnel your vision, still your gaze. You'll find that your mind follows and the distractions fall away, not because you resisted them, but because you left them no space to enter. Focus is not just a function of the mind, it's deeply rooted in the body. And two of the most immediate levers you can use to shift your cognitive state are posture and breathing. These aren't passive background variables. They are active signals constantly feeding information to the brain about how alert or distracted you should be. Change your body and you change your brain's ability to focus. Let's start with posture. When you sit in a slouched, collapsed position, shoulders forward, spine curved, gaze downward, you're sending a powerful signal to your nervous system. I'm not engaged, I'm passive. This position is associated with a state of low arousal, which in biological terms means reduced readiness, lower alertness, and slower cognitive processing. It's not a coincidence that this is the posture most people fall into when they're tired or bored. The body follows the brain, but the brain also follows the body. Now shift that posture. Sit upright, shoulders slightly back, chest open, eyes level. Instantly, you change the signal. This alignment activates the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, specifically the circuits that prime you for engagement. This isn't about stress or panic. It's a controlled activation, one that sharpens your attention and prepares you for cognitive work. The spine is more than just a structural element, it's a communication highway. And when you align it properly, you optimize signal flow between the body and the brain. Then there's breathing, one of the fastest and most direct ways to control neural state. Most people breathe shallowly and unconsciously, especially when distracted. This shallow, upper chest breathing is associated with a reactive mode where the body is scanning for threats but not deeply engaged. It keeps the brain in a state of vigilance, not focus. If you want to reset your attention, you need to shift to diaphragmatic breathing, slow, deep breaths that expand the belly and lower ribs. Diaphragmatic breathing increases parasympathetic tone, the calming branch of the nervous system, but it also stabilizes the oscillatory patterns in the brain associated with sustained attention. In simpler terms, it quiets the noise and boosts the signal. And the key isn't just to breathe slowly, but rhythmically. A controlled inhale of about 4 seconds, followed by an exhale of 6 to 8 seconds, sends a message of internal control. This rhythm tells the brain that the environment is safe, predictable, and now it can focus. The most powerful effects come when posture and breath are aligned. When you sit tall and breathe deeply, you anchor your body in a state of active engagement. You're no longer relying on willpower to concentrate. You're building the biological conditions for focus to arise naturally. And what's even more important, you can shift into this state instantly. No app, no supplement, just conscious adjustment of how you sit and how you breathe. This is physiology in service of cognition. When you use your body the way it was designed to be used, upright, open, and rhythmically breathing, you access neural pathways that are evolutionarily wired for focus, clarity, and directed effort. Your ability to focus isn't just determined by how motivated or disciplined you are. It's governed by your physiological state. And the fastest way to shift into a state of heightened focus is by manipulating that state on demand. The brain doesn't exist in isolation. It's reading constant feedback from the body, and it adjusts your levels of alertness, energy, and attention based on that feedback. This means that if you want to control focus, you need to learn how to control your physical state. One of the most effective ways to do this is through cold exposure. When you expose your body to cold, whether through a cold shower, an ice bath, or even just splashing cold water on your face, you trigger a rapid release of epinephrine and norepinephrine, two key neurochemicals involved in alertness and sustained attention. These molecules increase heart rate, sharpen vision, and enhance focus by increasing activity in the locus ceruleus, a brainstem nucleus that's central to the alertness system. Importantly, this isn't about stress or discomfort. It's about deliberate stimulation. A brief cold exposure acts like a biological on switch for mental engagement. Movement is another powerful lever. A short, intense burst of physical activity, say 20 push-ups, jumping jacks, or even walking briskly up a flight of stairs, can elevate your cognitive performance immediately. Why? Because movement activates the sympathetic nervous system, increasing circulating levels of norepinephrine and dopamine, both of which are critical for mental clarity and focus. But there's more. Physical movement also enhances blood flow to the brain, delivering oxygen and nutrients precisely when your brain needs to be operating at full capacity. This doesn't require a full workout. Even 60 seconds of movement can shift your brain state. If you're feeling sluggish or unfocused, the problem may not be your task or your mindset. It might just be that your body hasn't given your brain the signal to engage. Movement provides that signal. Posture, as already mentioned, completes this triad. When you adopt an upright, aligned posture, you increase proprioceptive feedback from the spine and core muscles, signals that inform the brain that you're in a state of readiness. This postural feedback combines with movement and breath to produce what's known as a state shift, a rapid change in neurochemical tone that primes the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for focus, planning, and execution. What's critical here is that these shifts are immediate. You don't need 20 minutes of meditation or a carefully timed supplement stack. You need action now. A cold splash, a quick set of movements, a posture reset, and you shift the chemistry of your brain in real time. You go from passive to active, from scattered to focused. This is not mental trickery. It's a deliberate engagement of hardwired biological systems that evolved to prioritize survival, vigilance, and task execution. And when you learn to control them, focus becomes a state you can enter at will, not one you have to chase. Focus doesn't start in the brain, it starts in the environment. What surrounds you is not just background, it's a direct input to your nervous system. Your visual system is constantly scanning for cues, and every object, every color, every pattern in your space sends information to your brain that must be processed. That processing takes energy. It takes attention. And when your environment is cluttered, you're bleeding cognitive resources before you've even begun the work. This is not subjective. It's not about whether you feel distracted. It's about how the visual and attentional systems are wired. The visual cortex in your brain is a massive consumer of neural energy. It processes more than 30% of all incoming sensory data. When your field of view contains disorder, open notebooks, scattered papers, loose cables, unused gadgets, your brain has to sort what's relevant from what's not. That sorting process uses executive function, which should be reserved for your actual work. This is why clutter is so destructive to focus. It acts like cognitive noise. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, your brain is spending valuable resources suppressing irrelevant stimuli. This suppression is handled by the prefrontal cortex, the same region responsible for focus, planning, and task execution. So every bit of clutter is draining the very systems you rely on to concentrate. You're starting the race with half your energy already spent. But here's the opportunity. Attention is trainable, and the first place to train it is through environmental control. When you design your workspace with intention, you reduce the burden on your attentional systems. You free up neural bandwidth. That means fewer micro decisions, less perceptual interference, and more capacity to go deep into the task at hand. This doesn't mean your space has to be minimalist in the aesthetic sense. It means it has to be functional. Every object in view should serve a purpose. Ask yourself, is this helping me focus or pulling me away? Remove anything that doesn't contribute to the current cognitive goal. And, importantly, reduce visual variability. Smooth surfaces, clean lines, and consistent colors minimize what your brain has to filter out. You're simplifying the sensory input stream, and in doing so, you amplify clarity. Even light plays a role. Bright overhead lighting, especially with a cool color temperature, activates brain regions associated with alertness and vigilance. Dim, warm lighting has the opposite effect, downshifting the nervous system into a more relaxed, potentially distracted state. Your lighting should match your task. The environment is not neutral. It either works for you or against you. And when you make your environment frictionless for focus, your brain rewards you. The absence of distraction allows dopamine to be directed toward the task itself. You stop chasing novelty in your surroundings and begin finding it in your work. That's a profound shift. It means your brain is no longer reacting to the environment. It's using it as a launch pad for deep, sustained attention. The brain doesn't operate in a continuous, flat line of attention. It works in rhythms, oscillations of high and low focus that follow natural cycles, both daily and minute to minute. If you try to work against those rhythms, you will always feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill. But when you align your focus sessions with these natural patterns, you unlock both peak productivity and something even more powerful: neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to change and improve in response to experience. One of the most effective ways to do this is through timed focus blocks. These are not just productivity hacks. They are rooted in the biology of attention. Your brain can sustain intense focus for about 90 minutes, sometimes less, before it needs a reset. This aligns with what's called an ultradian rhythm, a natural fluctuation of alertness that repeats throughout the day. During that window, your brain's prefrontal cortex is most capable of suppressing distraction, prioritizing tasks, and executing complex behaviors. But outside of that window, pushing further becomes counterproductive. Neural fatigue sets in, dopamine drops, and errors increase. So the goal isn't to work longer, it's to work in tune with your brain. You set a clear focus interval, usually 45 to 90 minutes, and go all in. No interruptions, no task switching. You give your brain one target and you align all your systems, visual, physiological, and attentional, toward that goal. This depth of focus isn't just about completing a task, it's what triggers plasticity. Here's why. When you concentrate intensely on a challenging activity, you release acetylcholine, a neuromodulator that sharpens neural activity around whatever you're focusing on. Acetylcholine acts like a spotlight, marking synapses for change. At the same time, dopamine is released when you make progress or overcome resistance, reinforcing the pathways you're using. Together, these chemicals lay the foundation for lasting change in the brain. But, and this is critical, this only happens when effort is followed by deliberate rest. After each focus block, the brain needs a low stimulation recovery period. This is when memory consolidation and network integration occur. Take 5 to 15 minutes. Step away from screens. Don't distract yourself with new input. Just let your system reset. That quiet period is where the learning gets locked in. The reason this works so well is because it mimics the way the brain evolved to function. Periods of deep engagement followed by disengagement. It's a wave pattern. You ride the wave up during the focus block and let it drop during rest. That rhythm maximizes energy, minimizes burnout, and optimizes performance. Timed focus blocks are not rigid constraints, they're biological accelerators. When you use them consistently, your brain adapts. You get better at dropping into focus, faster at accessing flow, and more resilient to distraction. You're not just getting more done, you're rewiring your brain to make focus your default state. And that's a massive shift in how you operate, not just as a thinker, but as a learner and a creator. Most people think eliminating distractions is about willpower. Grit your teeth, block out the world, and try harder to stay focused. But that model fails because it ignores the actual mechanisms that govern attention. You don't beat distraction by brute force. You eliminate it by understanding and leveraging your neurobiology, the systems that control focus, motivation, and behavior at the chemical and circuit level. Let's be clear, your brain was not designed for modern focus. It evolved in an environment where vigilance, constant scanning of the surroundings meant survival. Distraction is, in a way, your brain doing its job. It's trying to keep you aware of potential threats or novel opportunities. In a world without smartphones, that made sense. In a world of infinite stimuli, it becomes a liability. But once you understand the levers, you can shift from reactive to intentional. At the heart of this is dopamine, not the molecule of pleasure, but of pursuit. Dopamine peaks in anticipation, not in reward. Every time you check your phone, switch tabs, or follow a random thought, you're chasing novelty because your brain thinks there might be something rewarding. That chase gives you a small dopamine pulse. It feels good for a second, then drops, leaving you craving another hit. That's the distraction loop. Now here's the key. If you train your brain to expect frequent novelty, it becomes less able to stay with sustained effort. You're literally dulling the circuits for focus by reinforcing the circuits for seeking. But you can reverse that. You can reshape the reward system to find value not in novelty, but in depth. And this is where neurobiology becomes the solution. When you leverage things like visual focus, posture, breathing, timed work blocks, and cold exposure, you're not applying discipline. You're activating neural systems that naturally support sustained attention. You're using the body to signal the brain it's time to engage. You're triggering norepinephrine for alertness, acetylcholine for precision, and dopamine for motivation. These are not abstract ideas. They're chemicals with switches you can learn to flip. Let's take posture. Sit up straight with eyes fixed on one point, and you activate circuits in the prefrontal cortex that suppress distraction. Or breath, a single deep inhale through the nose followed by a long exhale can shift your nervous system from reactive to focused in seconds. These are tools. They are reliable. When you work in rhythm with your brain, pulses of focused effort followed by recovery, you strengthen the exact circuits that allow focus to be sustained. You're not forcing yourself into focus. You're designing a brain that defaults to it. So the next time you catch yourself distracted, don't judge. Don't muscle through. Step back and ask what system is being triggered. What chemical is being depleted or overused? Then reach for the tools that reset that system. When you understand your neurobiology, distraction is no longer a problem to resist. It becomes a signal, a prompt to recalibrate, and a chance to take control from the inside out. The ability to focus isn't a matter of character, it's a matter of biology. When you stop relying on willpower and start working with the systems your brain is already wired to use, distraction loses its grip. You begin to shape your environment, your body, and your routines to signal one thing. It's time to engage. Whether it's through narrowing your visual field, aligning posture and breath, triggering alertness through cold or movement, or working in timed intervals that match your brain's rhythms, you are no longer at the mercy of your impulses. You're in command of them. Focus is not a gift, it's a trainable state. And when you learn how to access it reliably, intentionally, biologically, you unlock a level of clarity, creativity, and productivity that most people never experience. The tools are simple, the science is solid, and the results, when applied with consistency, are transformative. You're not just fighting distraction. You're building a brain that's wired for depth, presence, and purpose.